The sun rose lazily over Mbakong, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. The town stirred with its usual rhythm, the cry of roosters, the distant chants from the old shrine, and the hum of vehicles outside the new hospital. Mbakong was a place where time itself walked on two legs, one steeped in tradition, the other chasing the modern world. Elders still gathered beneath the great Iroko tree to tell stories of spirits and heroes, while young doctors carried stethoscopes instead of cowrie shells. Yet, both worlds bowed to the same wind, for the land of Mbakong had always been alive, watching, whispering, remembering. It was in this land that the spirit of Chief Ikon once walked tall. He had been no ordinary healer. Some said his herbs carried whispers of the ancestors. Others claimed his touch could chase death away. His hut still stood at the edge of the river, now overgrown with vines, and every breeze that passed seemed to carry his voice. "Healing," he used to say, "is not in the hand that mixes the herbs, but in the heart that believes." The villagers spoke of him with reverence, the man whose hands carried both herbs and hope. Even after his passing, his name was a prayer on many lips. From his blood came Naya, his only child, born beneath the scent of rain and the cry of drums. Unlike her father, she carried not a calabash of herbs but a bag of medicine. Her journey had taken her far from Mbakong's dusty roads to the glass towers of the city. There, she had learned the language of machines and science, yet the echo of her father's wisdom never left her. When she finally returned, the people gathered to watch her arrival. The children ran beside her car shouting, "The healer's daughter has come home with the wisdom of white coats." Standing before the gates of Amaka District Hospital, Naya felt the weight of two worlds pressing on her shoulders. One world spoke through her textbooks, clean, clinical, unyielding. The other whispered through her memories of herbs, prayers, and her father's gentle laughter. She had learned to respect both. "There is truth in both the forest and the laboratory," she often said. "You cannot heal a people by denying their soul." That evening, as the sun bent low behind the hills, Naya sat beneath the neem tree beside her husband. Sunda, the gentle man with kind eyes, had been her anchor through every storm. He was a biomedical technician, a man of science, yet his heart beat in rhythm with hers. "You will bring healing to this land," he told her softly, watching the wind stir her hair. "And I will build the walls that protect your dream." She smiled, leaning against him. "And what of our own home?" she teased. Tunde chuckled, his voice deep and warm. "A home without purpose is just a roof. Our home will be where the sick find peace. One day, Naya, we will build a clinic that carries your father's name, a place where herbs and machines will serve side by side." The crickets sang their evening song as the first stars appeared above them. In the distance, the faint drums from a naming ceremony echoed, the heartbeat of their land. Naya closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "May I never forget who I am, nor where I come from." And as the wind danced through the neem leaves, it seemed to carry a familiar voice, that of Chief Ikon, speaking from beyond the river of time. "My daughter, the world will test your hands, but let your heart remain pure." In that moment, the story of Dr. Naya Ikon, the woman who walked between two worlds, truly began. The sun had not yet reached the middle of the sky when Mama Ikon sat on the wooden stool outside her compound, pounding yam with hands that carried the story of survival. Her palms were rough, carved by years of labor, softened only by the prayers she whispered at dawn. Each thud of the pestle echoed through the courtyard, carrying with it memories of her late husband, Chief Ikon, the man whose herbs healed bodies, and whose wisdom healed souls. As she worked, her eyes followed Naya, who moved about the compound preparing for her shift at Amaka District Hospital. The girl's white coat hung freshly pressed on the line, swaying with the morning breeze like a flag of both pride and danger. Mama Ikon's heart swelled and tightened all at once. "My daughter," she murmured under her breath. "The child who walks with her father's fire, but in a world that fears the flame." When Naya entered the yard, her steps were brisk, her face bright. Mama, I'll be back by sunset. There's a ward round today. I need to prove myself. Mama Econ looked at her with that long, measuring gaze only mothers possess, one that sees both the surface and the soul. Prove yourself to who, Naya? To the ones who see your womb before your wisdom? Naya froze, adjusting her bag nervously. Mama, things have changed. The hospital is different from the village. There, knowledge speaks louder than gossip. Mama chuckled softly, the sound low and tired. You think the world has changed because the roofs are made of steel? The hearts of men are still made of clay, my child. Too soft to handle a woman's strength. Too fragile to see her shine. She stood up slowly, her wrapper rustling, and walked toward the small shrine at the edge of the compound. There, a clay pot sat beneath the old iroko tree, surrounded by cowries and dried herbs. She knelt, her knees pressing into the earth that had held her ancestors for generations. "O spirits of Econ's bloodline," she prayed, her voice trembling like the rustle of dry leaves. "Watch over this child of mine. Let her walk boldly, but not blindly. Let her hands heal, but let no hand rise against her." From the distance, Naya watched, torn between reverence and unease. "Mama, must you still pray to them?" she asked gently. "We go to church now. The pastor says—" Mama Econ raised her hand, silencing her. "The pastor speaks to heaven, my daughter. But these ones," she pointed to the shrine, "they speak to the soil. And we come from soil before we rise to heaven. Never forget the bridge that joins both." Naya lowered her head in respect. "Yes, Mama." When Mama returned to her stool, she looked at Naya one more time. "You carry two worlds in your spirit, my daughter. Your father's herbs and your mother's prayers, your education and your tradition. But remember this, when a woman climbs too high, the wind begins to whisper. Be wise when you walk among men who smile with their lips but curse with their hearts." Naya smiled faintly, though her chest felt heavy. "I will make you proud, Mama," Mama Econ sighed. "You already have, my child, but I pray the world will not punish you for it." As Naya walked down the dusty road toward the main street, where the tar met red soil, the sun caught her white coat and made it gleam. Mama watched her until she disappeared from view, then whispered to the empty wind, "The river runs strong, but even rivers fear the stones that wait beneath." And in that quiet moment, the birds stopped singing, as if the earth itself was listening to a mother's warning carried by the breeze. The road to Naya's house stretched long and quiet beneath the fading evening sun. The scent of wet dust filled the air as the wind rose from the east, whispering through the tall grass that bordered the footpath. Naya held her bag close, her steps slow and heavy, as if the air itself carried a secret it wished to tell her. The sky burned with gold and crimson, colors that reminded her of her father's shrine, where flames once danced in clay bowls beside the old iroko tree. That same warmth touched her cheek now, gentle but haunting. She stopped and closed her eyes. For a moment, the world was still. Then came the whisper, "The healer's path is never smooth." The voice was soft, neither from the living nor the dead, but deep within her bones she knew it. Her father's tone, calm, steady, full of warning and love. "Mama says dreams are bridges," Naya murmured to herself, her lips trembling. "But sometimes, bridges lead to storms." She continued walking, but the evening had changed. The cricket's song now sounded like whispers of judgment. Every gust of wind felt like a sigh from the unseen. Somewhere behind her, a dog barked, short, sharp, like a signal. She could not shake the feeling that the air itself was watching her. When she reached the crossroads, where the red road met the new tarmac, she paused again. The wind blew stronger, tugging gently at her hair. In its rhythm, she heard her father's voice again. "You were born to heal, Naya, but even healers bleed." Her knees weakened. She clutched the small pendant around her neck, a charm her mother had given her, made from cowries and ashwood. The old tales said it could ward off jealousy, but tonight, it felt heavier than usual, almost as if it carried the weight of what was coming. "I am not afraid," she whispered, trying to sound brave. but her words disappeared into the wind, swallowed by the gathering dusk. A group of women passed by, balancing firewood on their heads. One looked at her curiously, then said to the others, "The healer's daughter walks with the wind again. That one's spirit is restless." Their laughter faded into the distance, leaving only the hum of the night and the beating of Naya's heart. As she neared her compound, lightning flashed in the far-off sky. It was strange. The clouds were few, yet the heavens warned of rain. She took it as an omen. Mama says thunder visits before misfortune, she thought. Maybe it comes to test the strong. Her steps quickened. When she entered the compound, the lamps were already lit. Mama Econ was humming a hymn in low tones, her shadow flickering against the wall. The smell of burning palm oil filled the air. "Mama," Naya said softly, standing by the doorway. "I think Father spoke to me." "I think Father spoke to me." Mama Econ stopped humming but didn't turn. "He does that when the earth is shifting, my child. When the river begins to murmur before the flood." Naya's eyes filled with confusion and fear. "What flood?" Mama sighed deeply, her voice carrying both warning and sorrow. "The kind that doesn't wet the body, Naya, only the soul." The night thickened around them. The wind outside grew wilder, brushing through the mango leaves as though carrying secrets between worlds. And as Naya lay awake that night, listening to the restless wind beat against the roof, she knew something unseen was already moving, quietly, like a shadow waiting for dawn. The next morning, the air in Amaka Hospital would no longer feel the same. The wind that brushed through the wards of Amaka Hospital carried more than the smell of disinfectant. It carried secrets. Beneath the hum of ceiling fans and the shuffle of white shoes, whispers crawled like shadows under the doors. "Keep your head low," one intern murmured as Naya passed, "and never be alone in the consulting room." They spoke in half voices, their eyes darting toward the chief surgeon's office. Rumors filled the air like the scent of infection, invisible, yet suffocating. Some said Obajo's power stretched beyond the hospital walls, reaching even into the pockets of the board. Others said he kept files, dark secrets of those who dared to oppose him. "Didn't you hear about the pharmacist who vanished after accusing him?" One nurse whispered while pretending to arrange files. "Shh," another hushed her. "Walls have ears here, and Obajo's ears are the sharpest." Naya listened quietly, her heart sinking. Every word was like a drop of poison on her spirit. She wanted to believe it was all lies, jealous tongues wagging. But deep down, she knew the way fear settled in people's eyes could not be faked. By evening, the whispers turned into silence, the kind of silence that screams louder than words. It was during one of those long evenings that Sister Ijoma, the matron with gentle eyes and trembling hands, called Naya aside near the maternity ward. The faint smell of baby powder filled the air as the old nurse looked around before speaking. "My daughter," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "You remind me of someone." Naya frowned softly. "Who, ma?" Ijoma swallowed hard, her eyes clouding with memory. "A midwife named Ngozi. She too carried light in her hands. Until he dimmed it." The words hung heavy. "What do you mean?" Naya asked. Though her heart already dreaded the answer, Ijoma's lips quivered. "He made her end her pregnancy, said it was unprofessional. She bled for days after that, not just from her body, but from her soul. She left the hospital and was never the same again. Some say she still walks the corridor at night, searching for her lost child." A chill passed through Naya. The hum of the fluorescent light above seemed to grow louder, almost mocking. "Why didn't anyone stop him?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Because those who tried," Ijoma said, her eyes dark with fear, "did not stay long enough to tell their story. Days turned into weeks, and the hospital that once felt like a temple of healing became a cage of cold stares and careful steps. Every corridor seemed to close in on Naya. Smiles from colleagues now hid suspicion, sympathy, or betrayal. Even the patients noticed her silence. "Doctor, are you well?" one woman asked gently during rounds. Naya forced a smile. "I'm fine, Mama, just tired." But she wasn't fine. She was suffocating under invisible chains. Chains of fear, injustice, and unspoken threats. Each time she walked past Abajo's office, the air grew heavier. His shadow seemed to stretch long, following her down the hall. One evening, after an endless emergency surgery that lasted through the night, Naya's body finally gave way. Sweat soaked her uniform as her vision blurred. The room spun. Voices became distant echoes. "Tunda," she murmured faintly before collapsing. Her head struck the cold tile with a sharp sound that silenced the room. Instruments clattered. "Naya!" "Dr. Naya," cried one of the interns, rushing to her side. Another called for help, but panic spread faster than help came. Nurses gathered around, trying to lift her, fanning her face with trembling hands. Then the door opened. Dr. Obajo walked in, his presence cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Move aside," he barked, his tone dripping with authority. His gaze swept over Naya's unconscious form, then turned to the interns. "Is this how you represent this hospital? Collapsing in the middle of duty?" The nurses exchanged nervous glances but said nothing. Compassion turned to fear. "Get her out of here," he commanded. "This is not a maternity home." His words stung the air. Even the ceiling fans seemed to stop spinning. Later that night, when Naya regained consciousness in the nurses' lounge, Obajo was waiting. His eyes burned with fury, his voice low but deadly. "You've embarrassed this department," he hissed. "If you can't carry the weight of your duty, maybe you should carry your pregnancy elsewhere." Naya's lips trembled. "Sir, He cut her off sharply. "No excuses? Either remove that pregnancy or remove your name from this hospital." She froze, unable to speak. The air grew thick, heavy with fear, humiliation, and disbelief. Obajo straightened his coat, adjusted his cufflinks, and looked down at her one last time. "This hospital has no room for weak women pretending to be doctors." He turned and left, his footsteps echoing like thunder down the corridor. Naya sat there in silence, tears filling her eyes. Outside, the night wind howled against the windows, carrying with it the same whisper she had once heard at the crossroads, the voice of her father saying softly, "The healer's path is never smooth, but even storms bow to the dawn." And in that silence, something within her, fragile but fierce, began to awaken. The night had fallen heavy over the city, its silence thick enough to choke the heart. Inside the small hospital quarters, the lamp by the bed flickered weakly, throwing trembling shadows across the walls. Naya lay on her back, her eyes wide open, staring into the darkness above. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and loneliness. Her pillow was damp, soaked with the quiet tears she had tried to hide even from herself. The ceiling seemed to whisper the cruel words she had heard earlier that day. Abort it or resign. Each word replayed in her mind like a curse she could not wash away. Her hand drifted to her belly. Beneath her palm, she could feel the faint rhythm of her baby's heartbeat, soft, steady, and stubborn. A tiny pulse of defiance. It was as though the child within her was whispering, "Do not give up, Mama. I am still here." Naya bit her lip, choking back another sob. The heartbeat echoed in her soul, blending with her tears, each drop falling like an unanswered prayer. "They will not break me," she whispered into the darkness. "Even if they strip me of everything, I will not destroy what is innocent." The moonlight slipped through the thin curtain, resting gently on her swollen belly. In that pale light, Naya saw not her weakness but her strength, the kind that grows only in silence, the kind that bleeds but does not die. Her tears slowed, though her heart still trembled. She turned to her side, clutching the edge of her pillow as if holding on to life itself. Outside, a dog howled in the distance, and somewhere in the hospital yard, the wind rustled the dry leaves like whispering spirits. In the quiet, between one heartbeat and the next, Naya made a vow, not to surrender, not to let fear write her story. Her child's tiny heartbeat lulled her like a lullaby of resistance. And though her eyes were swollen with grief, there was a quiet fire in them now, The first, spark of a storm that would soon shake the walls of injustice. The sun had barely risen when the hospital of Mbakong began to hum with its usual rhythm, the clatter of trays, the shuffle of slippers, the muted voices of the sick and the weary. But that day, something darker hung in the air. Naya stood in the operating theater, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her mask. Her body was weak from sleepless nights, her spirit weighed down by fear. Yet she forced a smile for the young nurse beside her. "Let us finish strong," she whispered. The surgery had gone on for hours. Sweat dripped from her brow beneath the harsh white lights. Her vision blurred for a moment, but she blinked it away, refusing to show weakness. Then suddenly, the world tilted, a tray clattered to the floor. The nurse gasped. "Dr. Naya!" Her knees gave way, her body collapsing beside the patient table. Panic erupted like fire through dry grass. Nurses rushed in. Interns froze in terror. "What happened?" "Get oxygen! Quickly!" someone shouted. Then came the voice that cut through the noise like a whip. Dr. Abajo. He stood at the doorway, arms crossed, his face twisted with disdain. "Look at her," he barked, his tone dripping with venom. "A disgrace to womanhood. A doctor who cannot stand on her feet, and she calls herself strong." The room fell silent. The nurses lowered their heads, fear gripping their throats. Naya lay still, her chest rising and falling weakly, tears mixing with sweat on her face. Obajo's voice thundered again, echoing through the sterile walls. "This is what happens when emotion rules over discipline. She should be home, not here, bringing shame to our profession." The words pierced deeper than any knife. But even as she lay there, half conscious, something inside Naya refused to break. In the blur of sound and shame, she could still hear the faint beat of her child's heart within her. It was small, but it was steady. As the nurses lifted her onto the stretcher, the corridors buzzed with whispers. Some pitied her, others feared for her future. Yet none could see the quiet fire still flickering behind her closed eyelids, a fire that would soon burn through the walls of silence. By sunrise, the hospital gates had become the heartbeat of Mbakong. From every corner of the town, people poured in. Students in white coats, market women with wrappers tied firmly at their waists, old men leaning on walking sticks carved from Iroko wood. The air trembled with song and rage. They chanted Naya's name until it rolled like thunder through the valley. "Naya, Naya, the daughter of Ikon!" The crowd moved as one, united by pain, fueled by hope. Drums thundered beneath the morning sky, and women raised their hands high, ululating in defiance. A young nurse climbed onto a stone and cried, "She fought for all of us! Let the world hear her truth." The chants grew louder, echoing through the hospital corridors, shaking the pride of men who once hid behind polished titles. Even the wind seemed to carry their cry, a cry for justice, a cry for change. Inside, Naya stood by the window, her heart trembling. She could hear them, her people. Their voices were no longer whispers in the dark, but a storm that no gate could hold back. And in that sound, she felt her father's spirit stirring again. From the crowd's front line stood Mama Ikon, her old eyes glistening like wet clay under the sun. She clutched her wrapper and looked up toward her daughter's window. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Ah, Naya, the spirit of your father stands tall today. The man who taught you to walk in truth. His shadow walks beside you now." The drums softened. The air grew still. Naya stepped to the balcony, her eyes meeting her mother's. Tears welled, but her lips curved into a soft smile. She looked up at the same sky that had once watched her cry in silence, the same sky that now carried the voices of her people. "Papa," she whispered under her breath, "the battle is won." The wind lifted her hair gently, as though her father himself had brushed her cheek. Around her, the crowd broke into song, a hymn not of mourning but of victory. Peace returned slowly, like dawn creeping after a long storm. With Obajo gone, the hospital breathed again. The corridors no longer echoed with fear but with laughter and song. Naya walked through the ward with gentle steps, her white coat lighter on her shoulders. The nurses called her Mama Courage, their eyes shining with respect. Even the patients smiled when she entered, for they knew her heart had bled so theirs could heal. One afternoon, an old midwife stopped her and said, "Child, the wound may close, but the scar must remind us where we have been." Naya nodded, her gaze soft. Each room she entered carried a story of resilience. The walls that once whispered pain now hummed with life. In every heartbeat she heard around her, Naya found strength. A reminder that healing was not only for the body, but for the soul. Weeks later, the hospital gathered beneath the great almond tree in the courtyard. The board stood before the people, and the chairman spoke with humility. "Today we rise as a new institution," he said. "We honor the tears that watered this change." They unveiled the new pregnancy protection policy, the first of its kind in the region. Murmurs filled the crowd, followed by applause that rolled like waves. Elders from Mbakong raised their walking sticks and blessed the initiative. "When a woman's tears shape a law," one elder proclaimed, "the land begins to heal." Naya sat quietly in the back, her hands resting on her growing belly. She did not seek glory, only peace. Yet in her silence she became a symbol. Her fight had become a shield for the daughters yet unborn. Far away, in the corners where whispers used to hide, truth had taken root. More women found the courage to speak, their voices weaving a tapestry of justice. Obajo's name, once feared, became a warning told in hushed tones. Beware the man who thought himself above the gods. His permanent dismissal was announced before the same board he once commanded. When the news spread through Mbakong, the people said, "No secret stays buried forever under the sun." And so, the shadow that had lingered over the hospital was lifted. The land sighed with relief, and Naya's story became a parable. That courage, when born of truth, can silence even the proudest tyrant. The cries of a newborn filled the small econ home like music from the heavens. Outside, rain drizzled softly, the kind of rain the elders said was a blessing from the ancestors. Naya sat by the window, cradling her son in trembling arms. His skin was warm, his tiny fingers curling around hers as if holding on to her strength. She looked into his peaceful face and whispered, "Your name shall be Ikon Obasi, justice restored. For you came from pain, but you will live with purpose." Mama Ikon, standing beside her, wept tears that glistened like morning dew. "Ah, the gods are merciful," she cried. They did not allow evil to have the final word. The drums from the neighborhood began to echo softly, a rhythm of celebration and rebirth. And as Naya rocked her child, she felt the weight of her scars fade into the warmth of his heartbeat, a sound that promised the world could heal again. Weeks later, a headline danced across radio stations and newspapers. "The doctor who healed her world with courage." The story of Naya's bravery spread like wildfire. Her face, once shadowed by fear, now became a beacon of hope across the nation. Children in classrooms spoke her name during lessons about integrity. Nurses in faraway villages told her story in whispers of pride. Mothers would hold their daughters close at night, saying, "Remember Naya, the woman who stood when others knelt." Invitations poured in, from schools, from hospitals, from women's circles. Yet Naya never boasted. She only said, "If my tears watered a tree of justice, then let it bear fruit for all who suffer in silence." Her story had become more than news. It had become a movement. When Naya walked back through the hospital doors, the air seemed lighter, as though the walls themselves breathed gratitude. Her steps were slower, her eyes softer, but her spirit glowed like sunrise after a storm. A new brass plate hung outside her office, Department of Ethical Medicine and Women's Safety. Beneath it, her chosen words read, "To heal is to protect." She paused for a moment, touching the sign gently. "Let this not be a title," she murmured, "but a promise." Every patient she treated carried a story, some of pain, others of recovery. Yet Naya saw each one as a reflection of herself. In every heartbeat, she found a purpose renewed. The same place that once broke her now became the ground where she rebuilt hope. And so, as the moon rose above the quiet town of Mbakong, an old narrator's voice carried through the night like wind through palm leaves. "A womb that carries life," he said, "should never carry fear. Justice may sleep, but it never dies." Children huddled close by the fire, their eyes wide with wonder as the storyteller's voice grew soft. "The child she carried became the sign," he continued, "that courage is not born in strength, but in the will to stand when all others kneel." The flames danced, the drums faded, and in the hush that followed, even the night seemed to bow, honoring the tale of Naya, the woman who turned her pain into the nation's light.